What's up? Welcome back to another day of wedding photography. Wouldn't it be crazy if the channel was always like that? Today, we're going to do a full wedding day behind the scenes with the Tamron 28-75mm. It's going to be on the Nikon ZF. This also comes for Sony as well. And for wedding photography, the 24-70 f2.8 is usually considered the do everything all day lens. And this lens here from Tamron comes in at a lower price point. And we're going to see how it does on a wedding day. I'm going to begin the day with it. It is a real wedding, so if I need to change lenses, I'm going to change lenses. But I do suspect this is going to do a lot of the coverage that I need today. If it's your first time seeing the channel, I am Taylor Jackson. I have photographed over 1,000 weddings all around the world. That means that a lot of years I was doing between 60 and 70 weddings. That's a very high volume for a one photographer studio. I also do hybrid photo video coverage as well. So today we're only doing photography, but other days we will do both photography and video. So today you're going to see some both GoPro on top of my camera as well as some screen records so you can actually see how the lens functions. Overall, I use this, this is my third time using this lens. I tested out a little bit last week. 2 days ago, I shot the ceremony with it, and there were a few standout photos, like this kind of close-up here of the officiant. This lens just has a three-dimensional pop to it that I really love. And it also comes with a lot of versatility because you get the full zoom range from 28 to 75 and the positives and negatives of using a zoom versus using primes. So usually on the channel here and usually in my work, I am always on primes. And the aesthetic quality and the shallow depth of field that comes out of it, very pleased with primes. But you do miss out on some shots with the lack of versatility that you have to run across the scene. Now I can just zoom across the scene. So there is a balance there and you got to figure out what the correct balance is for you. Don't just let me tell you that I use this lens, so you're going to go and use this lens. Find the lenses that work the best for you and the style of coverage and weddings that you are doing.
Now, there are only 2 days left to get in on my new course for speaking and making a YouTube educational platform. I go through everything that I do to get up on stages at the conferences around the world, as well as everything that I do here on YouTube to create an educational channel that is also profitable. So if that is a dream for you, I go through all of my numbers and how much I actually get paid and where I generate revenue. And the launch deal for that course is done on July 14th at midnight Eastern time. And July 14th is also my birthday. Woohoo! More about that later in this video.
Now back to the wedding day. Tamron 28-75 f2 G2. It's not an f2, it's an f2.8.
Photography only today. Also, if you're a member over on the members site, there is a full video where I walk through all the settings and you see all the settings for every photo that you're going to see in this video.
Hi there, I'm Taylor and this is what I look like again. Now we go back to taking the pictures. This is me walking up some stairs.
We can help you.
Oh, that's easy.
There.
Taylor. Let's talk about the form factor of the lens. It's nice, right? Zooming on the front. Focus ring here. I don't really find myself in current mirrorless times overriding the autofocus selections too often. And if I do, I'm usually tapping the back of the screen to refocus on something. It's a good size. It's not intimidating. It's definitely not the size and the weight of the Tamron 35-150, which is another lens that I absolutely love for weddings and more specifically for ceremonies. And the reason I love it for ceremonies is because it does everything and it zooms all the way to 150, which is awesome, but it comes with that heaviness and it comes with the largeness and the expensive price tag as well. So a lens like this, a little less or a lot less expensive, and will get you through a lot of the day. And as always, I have a button, so I have the front function button up here set to go from full frame mode into DX crop mode. If I am using a Sony camera, I have my C2 button up here set to that, so I can easily bump in APS-C crop, get a little additional reach. So if I am on that Tamron 35-150, hit that 150, bump into APS-C crop mode, and now all of a sudden I'm kind of at an effective 225mm. Same goes for this, but I don't know the math on 75 times 1.5. And you're not like getting another lens or technically more reach from it, you're just cropping inside your camera. So if you are using a service that I recommend, like Imagen, which edits all of my photos for me automatically, they're amazing. Use a link in the description to get 1,500 free edits rather than the 1,000 free edits that they'll give you if you just sign up on their regular website. So use the link, 500 bonus edits. And I use them to process all my files, and they're not going to crop exactly like me. They can come close, there is a cropping option, but I don't usually enable that. And if I can give them the final image with the actual crop that I want from my camera, I'm just going to get to the final gallery faster, which I appreciate. Oh, now on to what? What do we do now? So yeah, that's my car talking for now. Back to the wedding.
So to talk you through a bit of this wedding day, today we were doing a first look, but it's kind of a low-key first look. They want to do some photos before the ceremony, but they don't want to make the first look a big thing. So we're going to be doing it just a little bit outside of this hotel room in a covered space. The thing that I always look for before everything else is good quality of light. And as you can see in this room, very good quality of light overall. There are some pockets that as you would get back towards that dresser in the background there, the light would start to fall off, but in the corners here, you get that nice window light, and I'm very, very pleased with it. Every image you're seeing also has my M preset on it, so it's my TJ M 2024. So if you are part of the members website, or you've gotten in on the launch deal for the new course, which is the speaking and YouTube educational course, my full preset collection comes with that course as a standalone, or if you're a members website, you have access to it. I believe it's in this year's pack. I think it's just called 2024, and there's a few in there that kind of emulate some film-esque tones that I've been enjoying recently. Specifically Kodak Gold, I would say, is the main one that I like the best in there. So here's the first look location, and it's a very nice, shady, covered space. Always looking for good quality shade. There are usually directions that work a little bit better. In this case, it's nice because you almost kind of get this bounce off this wall here, so pretty much any location out here looks pretty good. But sometimes you'll get into some spaces where there's definitely a best direction of light. So the way that I test that is I will actually have my cell phone up, I'll do a selfie cam, and I'll just kind of spin slowly in a circle, and I'll see where the best light is coming from on my face. And I'll set the first look up kind of opposite of that, assuming it's kind of a bride-groom first look like we just did with the groom facing off somewhere. They will be facing into the bad light, they will turn into the good light. The other way to do it is to have them both facing away and then count down and they both turn towards each other and look at each other for the first time. Typically, I would say I do that during same-sex weddings more often than the way that I did it during this wedding here. And the Tamron 2.8 aperture of this lens working really well in here. The quality of light is great, but the quantity of light is a little bit low, and 2.8 definitely coming in handy.
So update after getting ready. I actually shot the lens pretty much at 28 the entire time. So I would usually be at 35 in a getting ready circumstance, and 28 fit the scene a lot better. So I'm very, very happy that I had that availability. And then the zoom was actually more helpful than I anticipated to just kind of zoom around scenes. It's your first time meeting a lot of these people, and it's a bit weird to just be the photographer in that situation. And to have the ability to zoom around, I do find it beneficial. Still full thumbs up so far for the Tamron 28-75mm f2.8 G2. It's also 35 degrees Celsius today. So hot. What is that in Fahrenheit? And arriving at the chapel. The light is really nice in here, which is awesome. And no complaints using f2.8 aperture. Usually I would be anyways, either on the 35-150 or 70-200. So I'm gonna take a quick look in here because the mom made all the baskets. Then maybe go get a few more prep photos over that way. Hey, how's it going? Oh, it's nice in here.
You get used to it.
Yeah.
In terms of settings, I am shooting everything at f2.8 pretty much all day actually. I don't think there's many times that I stop down, so everything you're seeing is wide open. I'm also in manual mode on my camera. If you're an aperture priority, that works totally fine as well. If your aperture priority is set to 2.8, maybe even with auto ISO. Most cameras are smart enough these days to make a pretty good job of any scene. The reason that I am kind of more on the manual side of things is because when I'm shooting video, I like to lock everything down. Dresses, suits tend to have a lot of contrast, so if a white dress or a dark suit walks into a scene, I don't want my camera compensating for that, so I lock everything down, including my ISO. The benefit of mirrorless cameras is you can see exactly what you're doing, so there's no guesswork. The downside though is that sometimes it'll hide stuff, so if your shutter speed is at 1/10 of a second, you'll think that you're getting great photos and then it'll turn out that you're not. You can usually set parameters so that your shutter speed won't drop lower than your focal length. I think every camera system I think allows that. For me though, I just like to have that manual control over everything. I used to say it was for editing consistency when I was editing my own photos or I was having an editor do it. If I could keep everything really consistent, it was easier for them. Now that I use Imagen, spelt Imagen, to process all my images, it doesn't really matter how exact consistent I am, but I think at least the way my backup process works is I shoot RAW and JPEG, as you can see in my camera. And when I get home from the wedding, the night of, I download all my cards. Usually I download them at the reception, and I will upload all of those JPEGs as my offsite backup. And if they're pretty much ready to go, maybe with a little bit of a color grade, I am happier with that. There's a very, very slim chance that I'll ever have to edit from those files, but if I do, it's nice to know that they're within a reasonable ballpark of where I want the final image. So I'm very conscious of getting it right in camera, and this is even more important when it comes to video coverage because you're just essentially shooting 24 or 60 JPEGs back to back to back within a second in order to make that video file. So you have a lot less of the ability to either change white balance or exposure. So I just like to get it correct in camera. Makes me feel better. And then if someone sees the back of the camera, they're like, wow, that looks really nice. Good job, photographer. The autofocus and everything on this lens working really, really well, and I have no complaints whatsoever. I actually really like having 28mm, and I'm usually on the, as I mentioned, the Tamron 35-150 for ceremonies, and to have 28 just a little bit wider, I feel like it makes it a little bit more environmental. I've spoken to this a lot in the past that if you are shooting something like an 85-1.4, you really don't feel like you're in the scene, whereas if you're shooting a 28mm lens, you really feel like you're there. And I think from the client side that if they're looking for somebody that does documentary style coverage, having 28 on the wide end of your zoom is really, really nice. It also, 28 also keeps things a little bit not as wide angle distorted as a 24mm lens. At 24, you start to get some lines doing some crazy stuff. With 28, it feels just a little bit more normal of a lens. In terms of the wedding day workflow, the light in this chapel is incredible. So I am going to get as many candids of guests as I possibly can here because usually I might not know what's coming next, but I know the room they're going to after this, and it is incredibly challenging in terms of lighting, that it's really direct pot lights that are really hyper focused and just bad in general for lighting. And then there's one kind of side room that's reasonable, but everything else is almost, it's worth doing a few wide shots, but you're not getting great candidates of guests. So I know that, and going into this space here, I'm going to do the best I can throughout the ceremony and throughout the after ceremony to get as many of those candidates as possible, because I want every guest that's here represented in the gallery in some way if possible. And if they're in good light, they're just going to look their best. They're going to be happier with that photo, and the couple's going to have better memories overall. I have some personal limitations when it comes to ceremonies, and right now everyone was standing just a moment ago, so I had no problem being up kind of at the front here. Usually I'll grab a few photos while everyone's standing, while there's a lot of excitement. And then once everyone sits down and the ceremony begins, I will go either to the left or right side and photograph from there. I don't love to be in front of family or the guests that are in the front row. During the ceremony, I feel like I can easily do my job from the sidelines here and then get back into the center of the aisle for ring exchange and first kiss and the things that I should absolutely be there for. Otherwise, I do my best to not kind of be in everyone's way. If you are looking at doing your first wedding, I would say that this is a very, very good lens to start with. You'll see on the channel that I shoot a lot of either a 35 or maybe 50mm or an 85mm prime lens, which does not zoom. And the positives, that I like the aesthetic look of them, but the negatives are that you are going to miss out on the versatility and the ability to get a few shots. And if it is one of your first weddings, I think that it's nice to have that versatility over top of maybe just the crazy shallow depth of field of a prime lens. It is nice to have a balance, but overall, I would recommend a lens like this Tamron 28-75 f2.8G over just trying to do an entire day on a 50 for your first wedding. You can see on the screen here that I'm actually just using all the autofocus points. I don't have any sort of limiter. On Nikon, you can put boxes around only where you want the eye autofocus to work. And I'm pretty happy overall with how things are functioning. You can also hit left and right if you just want to cycle quickly between people in the frame. And you might have also noticed in the top left, there's an S, and that just means for single shot mode. So I'm not doing any sort of high frame rate for pretty much the entire wedding day. Maybe sometimes the first kiss, or if it's a Jewish ceremony and they're breaking the glass, I usually go to a high frame rate for that. But other than that, I am on single shot mode all day. I think it helps curb my overshooting, and especially with the switch to mirrorless, I tend to take a lot more frames than I ever did on DSLR. And don't let anyone on the internet shame you for taking too many photos. If you take a lot of photos, as long as you get the moments that you want, don't worry too much about overshooting. I'd rather overshoot it and get the moment than not.
If you're reading any older forums on the internet, you might see a primes versus zooms debate. And this also, I guess, still goes on today. Even when I upload a video about zooms, like zooms are for amateurs, and no, they're not. They're incredibly good now. Maybe in the 80s and the 90s they were for amateurs. Even in the 2005 when I first started, they really weren't incredible. And they were definitely a lens to get you by if you needed like that Takina 11 to 16 on your APS-C body or whatever that lens was. It was definitely a thing that you could use if you were in a jam, but primes were definitely higher quality. They were also a lot less expensive. But now for the price of one good prime, or maybe even less if you're looking at the 1.4s or 1.2s for Nikon, you get something that's a heck of a lot more versatile. And the image quality is there. So the third-party manufacturers really have stepped it up. It used to be very much that they were a third party, and it was a bit weird to see somebody in a professional context shooting a non-native lens for their system. But I would say maybe like 5 years ago, even I'm gonna say 2016, I started using the Tamron primes, the 85 1.8 and the 35 1.8, because they had stabilization in them. And to do my hybrid photo video days, I needed stabilization because there was no IBIS yet. And at that point, I would say is when my opinion flipped of third-party manufacturers, and they have only gotten better from there. And I would say the huge thing that gave me the stamp of approval on all Tamron products was that 35 to 150 f2 to f2.8, specifically the one for mirrorless for Nikon Z and for Sony as well. I love that lens. I love the quality. I love everything about it. I love it at every focal length. There are some things to be aware of that I like as a wedding photographer, that lens specifically, when wide open, it's not going to be as sharp as a 35mm prime, like a GM prime at f2. And I actually like that because it adds a more natural feeling to skin tones, and it's less of a, you can see every individual pixel, which is something that I want for my wedding photography. And I also like the softness of how flare comes in, and I'm recording this at the beginning of the wedding, so I'm sure I'm going to talk a little bit more about how light affects this lens. But so far, I've really been enjoying it on the Tamron products.
So this lens controls light in a very good way. As you can see, there is some pretty intense, so all the light is kind of coming in from behind them there. Even on the GoPro, you can kind of see that it's starting to get a little bit spilly and a little not ideal. And the coating on the, whatever the coatings are on this Tamron lens, seem to hold that together really well. And there are no issues at all for me. I don't use any filters on the front of my lenses for the most part. Maybe if we're out doing landscape photography, I might change that. I might do an ND for some waterfall shots or some sort of CPL or something. For wedding days, I don't actually use any filters, and I will leave the lens hood on. So a lot of people will use a UV protected filter in case they bounce their glass off something and they don't want any issues. I use the lens hood to kind of act as that if my camera is on a strap on my side and I bump into a table, that the lens hood's going to take that impact rather than the actual lens itself. And that's been what's working for me over the years, and I haven't had any issues with lenses, fortunately. Now we go back into the heat. And I like to keep my sessions, whenever it is extremely hot out, I like to keep my sessions as short as possible. I want to obviously get all the images that the couple is expecting, but I also don't want to overshoot it and keep people there too long. I think the wedding party is very happy to head off to cocktail hours pretty quickly. And a trend that I've noticed over the past number of years is just that my couples 10, 15 years ago, they all wanted a full 3-hour wedding party session, and it was a lot of photos. And now most of my couples, I don't know if this just maybe speaks to the couples that I seem to be attracting, but they're very happy just with a few photos of the wedding party, maybe an individual of them with each of their side, and then releasing everyone to cocktail hour and finishing just with the two of them. I would say on average, my entire session here with the couple is somewhere between maybe 10 to 15 minutes. I'll also bring them out during sunset as well for some pictures if we are getting a sunset, or if sometimes the ceremony time just lines up so that it's actually already in good light. We might not go out during sunset, maybe we'll do a blue hour or an after dark session, or maybe none at all. I'd get a good read on my couples during the day, and specifically kind of this time, I try to feel it out to see if they want to do more photos, if they're happy with what they got and they want to go back to their guests. I use that as a guide on the day, and rather than trying to just stick to whatever plan that my brain had come up with. Also, that is open to interpretation by elements. So if, for instance, it was raining during the session here and we could just kind of get into covered spaces and get what we could, if it stops raining, I'm going to bring them out immediately, and they understand that. But if everything kind of goes to plan as it did today, we have some good light, we got some good shade, it's kind of starting to become golden hour adjacent, so I can kind of get those warm tones from sunset. So I'm probably not going to bring them out for an additional session beyond this. I kind of just maybe take an extra 3 or 5 minutes with them and make that the official photo session of the day. Now, what does a 100 degree Fahrenheit day need? Well, it needs a fire. They originally, so that this wedding happened a few months ago now, and it was intentionally in a time of the year where it wasn't supposed to be so hot, and it was. And their first dance was supposed to be in front of the fireplace, and it's a bit weird if the fireplace is just off. So they lit the fireplace just for the first dance, and then I think they turned it off immediately after that. Now moving into the reception, 2.8 aperture, great in this space. Even into darkness and incandescence, I am very happy to shoot at 2.8. At some point, if the quality of light becomes a bit weird, as you can see the overhead lights there, the chandelier style ones are great, but the pot lighty ones there might start to cause some issues. I might have to override that lighting a little bit with flash. I will also use it if I need to override mixed lighting colors. So right here is fine. I'm standing beside the window and the light is good from this direction. But when I get over here, you can see that their faces are lit by the incandescent lights, the LED lights. So I have to kind of balance that out a little bit with my flash, and I'm just bouncing it into the wooden ceiling there. You might be like, that's crazy. It's just gonna pick up all that wood tone and throw it back at them, but it honestly kind of works fine. Enough white light tends to come down that I'm happy with it. It obviously absorbs a lot more light, so you'll have to dial up your power a bit more. You can also bounce off a wall if you have a wall available. If you are in a barn situation where everything is just kind of the same color of wood, what I will typically do is just bounce off that weird color of wood and set a custom Kelvin white balance to balance that out. And is that the exact 100% correct way to do things? Probably not, but it is a way to basically get around the bringing in any sort of larger lights and modifiers for me to overpower the scene. If I can just get by with a speed light or maybe a single off-camera flash, I am a lot happier. So you can see here the light coming in from the windows. Great quality of light. Anyone looking at that window is in a good spot. There will be an awkward time period where the ambient light outside mixes a little bit weird, as you can see in kind of that shot there. At some point you'll get that weird in between time, and hopefully maybe they're just eating desserts or something and no one gets on the mic during that time. But if they do, I'll bring out a flash and pretty much overpower everything in that case. We had a bit of a gap in the schedule, so I asked a couple if they wanted to come out for 5 minutes for some photos by the waterfall, and they said yes, they just wanted to go for a walk. And we saw a few guests on the way out, and they were curious if they could come with, and I was very happy to say, like, come by, we'll do a photo of the two of you as well, or you and your partner, or you and your family. I'm very intentional about doing that, especially with the wedding party, that I am happy to take photos of them with anyone that they would like. Just make eye contact with me, find me during the day, and I'm happy to make that happen. I think that that's just something nice, and also it definitely leads to more referrals for you, that if you're the nice photographer and you're asking, maybe they just started dating, it's a bridesmaid and her partner, they just started dating, you ask to take some photos of them, and maybe that means that 5 years down the road you're going to be shooting their wedding. And even if not, that's fine too. You take a nice photo of them, they appreciate it, the couple appreciates it. It's something that I'm attempting to do a little bit more this year. Today's a little bit more challenging because I'm there alone, but if I do have a second, usually Tim or somebody during cocktail hour will do a few candids, but then also just ask people to get together for small little group shots with their friend circles, whoever's hanging out together and having a nice time. And I think that that's a very, very valuable thing to have in the final gallery for your wedding couples. This all said, there's no right or wrong way to photograph a wedding. I guess there is a right way. So there's some shots you absolutely need, but there's also a lot of shots and things that are open to your own interpretation of how you'd like to cover them. That for cocktail hour, you can do a few candid photos and you can do candid only coverage, and that's fine. Or you can pose everybody and get everybody together for photos, and that's also fine. So wedding photography really is, I'm gonna say it's mostly about what you would want if you were getting married. And when you start creating that work, that portfolio, there is a pretty good chance that it's going to connect with similar people to yourself, and you are going to end up kind of being the additional wedding party member for the wedding day. And it doesn't happen immediately. It takes some time for that to build. But at some point, you will start just creating the work that you want to exist. It will organically be attracting the couples that you want to be working for the most, and your life will become happy as a wedding photographer, and you'll start getting a few less red flag couples per year, and you'll start having more fun like we did today.
And there it is all day with the Tamron 28-75 f2.8 G2. Unintentionally, I guess, that I began the day with it, and it just turned out to be the absolute best tool for the wedding today. Didn't even have to change lenses one single time, which is pretty crazy. I'm also not doing any dance floor coverage tonight because it is currently sunset, and I am on my way out after the sunset session.
That's it. Only 2 days left to get in on that educational course. So if it is your dream to become an educator, to get up on stages at conventions, to be flown out to events and workshops, and to get to do wedding photography and teach people, or if you're interested in learning about the YouTube side of my business when it comes to educational content and actually making that a great revenue stream rather than just something that absorbs all of your time, which YouTube can absolutely do. If you're interested, get in on that in the next 2 days from the posting of this video, July 14th at midnight. It is done. And there's also a 100% money back guarantee. So if you get it and it's just not what you were expecting, send me an email and I will send your money back. See you next time.